Hey everybody, and welcome to part 2 of Barbinhimer, when a blitz turns into a dud. So last week, I left you guys all with somewhat of a tease on what we're going to be talking about this week. The general concept is you could have the exact same Barbie playbook, and in fact, other brands have done that, and it's gone completely sideways. And we're going to be diving into a very, very particularly bad example of this with Mickey's 90th celebration. I don't know if you remember that, but let's get into it. So, I don't know if you remember, but a couple years ago, Mickey was turning 90 years old, and Disney did a very particular, new artwork and kind of new logos and new colors around a specific kind of program. We call it a style guide. We have talked about that in our licensing breakdown video, which, if licensing at all is interesting to you, please go watch that video because we kind of break down every single step to get into it. It's pretty cool. But anyways, they create a style guide, and they made a new one for Mickey for his 90th. It was a different looking Mickey. It had different colors. It had like a bright yellow, and then instead of black, I think it was like a gray. That yellow was definitely more prevalent than in the normal kind of Mickey color scheme. They tried to do the same thing. They wanted it to be everywhere all at once, and I mean they did. They got it out everywhere. They were pushing that license very hard to brands. Even if they had done Mickey, try to do Mickey's 90th. If they hadn't done Mickey, hey, this is the perfect time to get in. They were it was only for a certain amount of time, like the celebration, kind of like the ones that they have at like Disneyland, had time on it. So they were a little bit more lenient with the royalty rate and the minimum guarantee, very similar to what we talked about last week with a movie promotion coming out, because they wanted just like this wave of people to be making product around Mickey's 90th to really back up the studio push around this big moment. But unlike what we talked about last week with Barbie being this really open-ended type of intellectual property where there's lots of different interpretations, there could be like a more, Cotton On did like an 80s version of Barbie, and then Crocs did a really like cheeky version with their shoes and the little accessories that they have. Disney was very specific with the style guide. You know, it has to be this. You cannot deviate from this. Now, when you have a ton of people doing something like that, that interpretation, letting the brand's DNA come through very easily, because it's easy to do that. It's easy to do that when you have like a very ubiquitous type property like Barbie, where a lot of things could be Barbie. But it's a lot harder to pull that off when you have a strict style guide and you have to incorporate your brand. A lot of times people won't opt in for that, and the brands will literally just take what they give them and put it on their product, because that is the path of least resistance. So they had a very, very specific style guide. So instead of you seeing the same pink but different interpretations, you started just to see the same Mickey face everywhere. It was just the same, like 2 to 3 logos, 2 to 3 different like orientations of Mickey's 90th and Mickey, and that kind of starts working in the same way that like seeing an ad too many times gets treated in your brain, where you're looking at it but your mind starts glazing over it because you're just seeing it too many times, and you're not giving it enough attention to really kind of be like, how is this Mickey different from the other Mickey? So it definitely started to blend in. What did not help with that is the oversaturation within categories in the marketplace. Disney and some other people, but I know that Disney tends to be a bad actor when it comes to this, is that they oversaturate a category, and instead of licensing, some people very affectionately refer to it as slicensing. So you'll have a certain, they won't let 2 people have a license to the exact same thing. Like 2 mass market beauty brands could not both be doing Princess Diana at the same time if they had the same customer base, because you would think, oh, okay, they're going to be competing, and it's going to really dilute the specialness of either one. They're not going to want to redo it, and then that's less kind of repeat business for Disney on that front. But what they will do is that they'll say, well, you're a mass market beauty retailer that has a 18 to 25 demo, and you're a mass market beauty retailer that has a 25 to 40 demo, you are technically two different demographics, so we're going to give you the same thing. Even though that's their core demo, like, there's going to be overlap. Like, it's very obvious. This is a perfect example of it. Now, zoom out on that kind of licensing into every single category, with shoes, with apparel, and you start to realize just how crowded it would feel to see, not just one shirt or two shirts, but 50 different shirts. And theoretically, the brands are all in different segments, but maybe they're clumped together at a certain kind of retailer, and you're just like, there's a shit ton of Mickey shirts, and they all kind of have the same logo, so I'm not really seeing what I'm supposed to be doing with any of these. Again, you just glaze over it. Another really bad problem with something like this is very similar to how we were talking about, I went into the Crocs store because I saw Barbie and I wanted to see what their interpretation of it was. It got me to interact with a brand I otherwise would not have interacted with. When you kind of smush together too many brands doing the exact same style guide, you kind of lose out on one of the big reasons that people get into licensing, is that you're tapping into the brand affinity of that IP and trying to carry that over into your own brand. Now, they lost that because if there were 50 different people making shirts that all had the same Mickey on it, I like Mickey, but I have no idea why I'm supposed to pick one brand over another. I might just pick one at random. I might just get overwhelmed and leave. And when you do that, what you're left with is serving your existing customer base. If you had two different t-shirt brands and they were part of that fold that didn't get any new Mickey Disney fan customers because the space was too crowded, they were then left to sell on their own respective websites and points of distribution these like Mickey branded shirts to their audience. And there's probably overlap between their audience and the audience of that IP. But if they're getting into the fold specifically to get outside of their audience to bring in new customers, their existing customers are probably not going to resonate enough to move through that amount of inventory. And if they budgeted and forecasted out enough inventory to serve a small percentage of their existing customers, but a large percentage of brand new customers that were coming because of the IP, they now do not have those people. So they're stuck. That's what happened to the brand I was working with. We were stuck. We were stuck with a lot of inventory because people just fatigued. They just were like, oh, another Mickey thing. Oh, it's the same logo. Oh, cool. And even though like our execution on it was very, very cool, we would have had to have spent so much to kind of like really differentiate out that you start going, okay, what's the opportunity cost to move through the last bit of this Mickey inventory that I'm not rerunning, and what am I not doing for my core brand by pushing this? So it ended up just kind of being like one of those, okay, let's just move on from this. But that leaves like a bad taste in your mouth, and then when you try to come around and get pitched another intellectual property, that's, at least for like, finance people too, that's top of mind, is the last one we did not really work out. So how is this one different? That is one detail that I didn't mention last week, but I really do like that even though you could very easily say, oh, that Barbie licensing was everywhere, which it was never in like the same place twice. You know what I mean? There was very few instances where there was more than one type of brand jumping into the Barbie fold. So every time you saw another Barbie thing, it felt different enough, even within the same category. Here at the mall that's near us, there's a Cotton On right next to an Aldo, which right next to the Crocs, which is funny. And all three of them did Barbie. But you could stand and look at the three windows and absolutely see not only the brand, but the interpretation of the IP and how they're different, and how I am not fighting against any other consumer or worried that I'm going to oversaturate them. Your Cotton On person that's coming in for that like distressed 80s looking t-shirt is not the person at Aldo looking for fast fashion. And if they are, they're not going to buy a competing piece and cannibalize the business. It is a very, very different segment of like the overall apparel category. So again, kudos to their team for being everywhere, but not being oversaturated. I wish I had a quippier thing at the second half of they were everywhere, but they weren't blank. If you have a quippy thing that would work for that, please leave it in the comments because I will steal it and use it elsewhere. So that is it for Barbinhimer Part 2. I hope that this was a good yin and yang across the two videos. Let me know what you think of this new format where I kind of have a bigger issue and I break it up into videos. I'm looking to do that actually starting next month on drop shipping and why that is a mess and a scam most of the time and not a whole business. It's just not. So leave your questions, I guess, for that as well. If you have any questions on drop shipping and why it's a horrible scam, and stay tuned. But until then, it's been business as usual.